Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the incredibly complex, honestly kind of fascinating character of Silas Marner. So whether you're a longtime fan of George Eliot's classic 19th century novel, or you're a student looking to completely master the text and absolutely crush your upcoming literature exams, you are in the exact right place. We aren't just going to sit here and summarize the plot. No, we're going way beyond that. We're going to dissect his motivations, his tragic isolation, and his eventual redemption, giving you the exact analytical tools you need to succeed.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to kick things off with Silas's origins and his 15 years as a recluse. Then we'll track his incredible journey from losing his gold to finding true joy, tie it all into the novel's key themes, and finally show you exactly how to apply all of this to ace that Edexcel literature exam.
All right, Section 1. Meet Silas Marner. We really have to examine our protagonist's tragic roots to truly understand his baseline character.
You simply cannot analyze Silas without understanding the trauma that fundamentally changed how he interacts with the world. The contrast here is just staggering. On one hand, you have this trusting, deeply religious young man in his hometown of Lantern Yard. He was happy, he was simple, he had a fiancée, great friends, and earnest faith. But then, his absolute best friend, William Dane, falsely accuses him and frames him for a crime. And Silas? He is utterly shattered. He literally loses his faith in God and humanity overnight. So, when he eventually migrates to Raveloe, he's a completely different person. He becomes this cold, bitter, isolated miser. His whole life becomes about just surviving in this bitter shell, working relentlessly at his loom and hoarding his money.
Now, what really seals his fate as an outcast is his physical condition. Silas suffers from cataleptic fits. Basically, these are trances where his body becomes solid as a stone, something a local named Jem Rodney actually witnesses. On top of that, Silas has this discreet knowledge of medicinal herbs that he learned from his mother. And sure, he uses this knowledge kindly, like when he cures Sally Oates of her illness. But the uneducated villagers of Raveloe, they completely mix up his medical knowledge with his physical seizures, and they wrongly assume he has supernatural or occult powers.
Moving on to Section 2, the Recluse of Raveloe. Let's see how all of this builds into his 15-year period of total social isolation.
This brings us to a really crucial textbook question. You'll frequently see this pop up on exams. How did the people of Raveloe regard Silas? To answer this well, you have to look at both his behavior and the deep, deep prejudices of the townspeople.
So the real crux of the issue is that his odd appearance and antisocial behavior just totally fueled the village's wild myths. Silas was this pallid, bent-over man from constantly working at the loom. He had poor eyesight and these brownish, bulging eyes that gave him a genuinely frightful air. Plus, he was a non-native loner, living on the edge of a deserted stone pit, and he never went to church. So naturally, the villagers viewed him with intense suspicion. Kids were terrified of him. The village basically just tolerated him because they needed a weaver, but they happily kept their distance for a full 15 years.
Which brings us to Section 3, Lost Gold, Found Joy. Every great story has a turning point, and Silas's comes through a profound loss.
Let's dive into this timeline, because it tracks his entire emotional journey, bringing the narrative full circle. He starts in Lantern Yard, deeply wounded by that betrayal. Then, for 15 long years in Raveloe, he pours literally all of his affection into the gold he earns. It's his only comfort. But then, catastrophe strikes. The squire's son steals his money. Silas is devastated all over again. However, this massive void is unexpectedly filled by a little fair-haired orphan girl named Eppie, who just wanders in and falls asleep by his fireplace. Raising her slowly restores his trust in humanity, eventually giving him the courage to return to Lantern Yard to seek closure. It just beautifully proves he is decidedly not the same person who left it.
Now, examiners absolutely love testing you on character arcs, so we really need to look at how you should tackle this classic descriptive question. Describe the change in Silas's character.
The best way to map his evolution is in 4 distinct, measurable steps. Step 1, we have his original, unjaded self, the honest, simple man in Lantern Yard. Step 2, he becomes the recluse. This is his defense mechanism, dedicating all his energy to hoarding gold so he never has to rely on people again. Step 3 is the catalyst. The robbery forces him out of his cottage to actually confront the community, communicate, and find sympathy for the very first time in Raveloe. And finally, Step 4, the ultimate transformation. He takes Eppie in as his own child, which unites his old faith with a brand new, localized trust in the world around him. All right, Section 4, Key Novel Themes. If you want to write a top-tier exam answer, you have to weave these major themes into your analysis. You can't just describe what happens, you have to explain what it means. Listen to this exact quote from the source material because it is absolutely brilliant. It reveals that Silas constantly needs a foundational prop to survive. Whether that's religion back in his early days, his relentless work at the loom, his towering piles of gold, or, ultimately, a child. Silas is a man who requires something to lean on to find the courage to face life. That underlying psychological need, that is the true, unchanging core of his character, even as his external circumstances shift so drastically.
You also need to highlight the powerful thematic contrast between his hoarded gold and Eppie. The gold is sterile, it's isolating. It's really just the product of his spiritual desolation, a cold, hard substitute for actual human connection. Eppie, on the other hand, is vibrant. She requires interaction, care, and integration into the village. She brings him infinitely more happiness than wealth ever could. She allows his hidden capacity for sacrifice to finally manifest, proving that true wealth actually lies in reciprocated companionship.
Finally, Section 5, Acing Your Literature Exam. Let's look directly at the Edexcel marking scheme so you know exactly how you're going to be graded. When you compare the lowest level 1 mark band to the highest level 5 mark band, you can immediately see the massive leap you need to make to get top scores. We're talking about jumping from a measly 1 to 4 marks all the way up to the 17 to 20 mark range. So what exactly are the examiners searching for in those top-tier essays?
Well, the difference is basically night and day. A level 1 response is just a simple narrative. You're basically just retelling the story with zero personal response and barely any reference to the themes. But for a level 5, you need an assured personal response. You need a critical style developed with maturity. And most importantly, you need discerning references with full support from the text.
Ultimately, elevating your grade means using those specific character traits and thematic quotes we just talked about to firmly support your critical insights. Don't just tell the examiner that Silas changed, explain that his love of money was a product of spiritual desolation, and prove it by contrasting his isolation with the restorative community connection forced upon him by adopting Eppie. When you use terms like cataleptic fits, when you reference characters like William Dane or Jim Rodney, and when you discuss his need for a prop to lean on, that is exactly the kind of discerning textual reference that examiners reward with level 5 marks.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought about Eppie's life-changing choice. Towards the end of the novel, Eppie discovers the truth about her biological father, Godfrey, and she is offered a life of high-class wealth, but she rejects it. She chooses to stay with the humble, aging weaver who actually raised her. It really forces us to ask, what would she have gained in high society, and what fundamental, soul-nourishing love would she have given up? More importantly, if you were in her shoes, choosing between absolute financial security and the only true love you've ever known, what would you have done?